Thank you all for coming. 3:05 p.m. here on the 24th of August already. A couple things right before we get the meeting started. Kathy McClutchy will not be here. She's still not feeling too well, so she has to have a bye and a pass and whatnot. Second thing is John Kimball just got out of the hospital. He was unfortunately had elevated heart rate, so he won't be here today. So his he said upper management, he said, I'm feeling great now. He said they've restarted the heart and all that stuff. He said, I'd love to attend the meeting. He said, but upper management said I'm not allowed to go, which means Denise said, you're not going to the meeting. So I took care of that. Third thing is Shiloh also sent me a note, and she is currently unemployed or laid off, so to speak. But the reason she's not here is she's moving her daughter into the dorm room and that sort of thing right now. So.
And you have a new member.
You
have a new member.
And we have a new member. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm getting with old order first, and we'd like to welcome our new member, of course, so no worries there. Let's go ahead and do a call to order, please, and we'll go for it. And roll call starting that end.
Robin Holderman.
Monty Black.
Bob Murdoch.
Diane Frederickson.
Bob Kramer.
And Bob Kramer is our secretary de facto for the moment, so
Yeah.
we're good to go there. All right, we have a copy of the previous minutes here, Bobby.
Yes, you do.
If you could read those, please, so we approve those.
You can read them. I don't know.
All right, well, I will do that. On July 20th, the meeting minutes are such as follows. Call to order. I called the meeting to order at 3 p.m. The roll call at that point, the members there present were myself, Shiloh Sumsky, Supervisor Bob Kramer, Robin Holderman, Monty Black, John Kimball, and Kathy McClutchy. We introduced ourselves. Then we had a discussion with Sharon Lang, who is the Sheboygan County Economic Development Director, who I think is going to be a great partner for us. Ms. Lang spoke to the group about services she can offer, past projects, and conducted a general discussion on development and grant opportunities. We did the orientation. Supervisor Kramer provided policies and the Open Meetings Act handbook and briefly discussed the open OMA. The bylaws, the draft bylaws are passed out for consideration at the next meeting. I hope everybody had a chance to read that. Supervisor Kramer requests that he be a non-voting member as an ex officio, and that the DDA be invited to provide a member for inclusion to the task force, which we now have. Ms. Frederickson, a DDA member who was present, said she would take on that request to the DDA. Election of officers, I'll be the chair for the moment, and Mr. Kimball is elected secretary. General discussions, the members discussed business outreach, current business climate, potential new businesses, grants, housing, zoning. Mr. Black stated he conducted a housing study that shows the township needs 27 additional workforce housing units. Next meeting was for today, August 24th at 3 p.m. Respectfully submitted, Bob Kramer, Township Supervisor. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Approval is done.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Introduction of Lindsey Clark. She's getting set up at the moment.
I think I'm ready.
You think she's ready? Okay.
Yeah.
Lindsey Clark is the Community Development Director for MEDC, who's going to be our new best friend.
Yes, absolutely. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for being
Excuse me a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Ron, could you turn that a little so people can see?
So everybody can see it? Yeah.
And I want to know if Lindsey Miller got married.
Well, funny story. I did a couple years ago. So I just changed my name, though. So you can call me either Lindsey Miller or Lindsey Clark. You'll see it still both ways. I'm trying to be one person.
Just trying to confuse me.
But it gets confusing. So I'm transitioning to be Lindsey Clark, which is my married name, has been for a couple of years. I just was holding on to that maiden name for a little bit. You know, like it's been a part of you for so long. It's hard to let it go. But so you can email, I think I have 2 different email addresses. You can email either one. Everything still comes through to me. I do have some cards today with also all of my contact information. But so I am the Community Development Manager at the MEDC for Region 3, which is kind of this whole northeastern corner of the state all the way down to West Branch and kind of up back around 23. And then I also cover part of the eastern Upper Peninsula. So my role is to work with communities, developers, business owners to just help educate about our economic development tools at the state level and to be here for you guys as a resource and then to help with any projects that want to move forward with potential funding from some of the sources that we have. You guys are extra special because I actually live not far from here. I know it seems like I maybe drove far because I was running late, but that's just me. So I live just a little bit north in Sheboygan area. So
Which is good for us.
Yeah, it's great for you guys. Sheboygan's been a super active community, and it's not because I live there. It's just because they've really put a lot of time locally into investing in what they want to see happen, envisioning, and then planning for that development, and then figuring out how to attract some developers. So I've been with the MEDC since 2018. Since my time, we've had probably at least 4 or 5 projects utilizing our tools at the MEDC, looking at different, building redevelopments downtown. So I don't know how often you guys come up to Sheboygan, but if you would have came to Sheboygan 10 years ago, so I've lived there for 15 years now. The first 5 to 7 years, our downtown was pretty vacant, lots of empty buildings. There wasn't, a good mix of businesses. There weren't a lot of people walking around. I just had a meeting downtown Sheboygan, and the streets were just bustling with people still, especially for this time of year. It's still pretty active. We have a good variety of storefronts. We have very few storefronts that are available. It's just been really exciting to see that momentum and that transition with the downtown. And so they've utilized some of our tools to get to that point, and so that's what I'm happy to share with you today is kind of some of those key pieces of how to get that progress going in your communities. So the MEDC is the state's lead economic development organization. So we are part of the state's budget, and so that's where our funding comes from for our programs. Over the years, our funding thankfully has been very consistent, so we have great leadership at the state level that recognizes the importance of economic development and what this means for our communities and for attracting talent to our state and to our communities, and developing these as a place where people want to live and spend their time. So the MEDC is a very large organization. Our headquarters is in Lansing. I was just there earlier this week. We kind of have 3 segments of our organization. So I work under the umbrella of community development. We also have a whole staff of people who work under business development. So they're really focused on attracting talent to Michigan. So things like job creation, bringing new industries to the state. And so they have a whole nother set of tools available for that job creation and retention to our state. But under community development, we're really focused on developing that attractive place of where people want to live and spend their time. And then we also have Pure Michigan, which hopefully you guys are familiar with the Pure Michigan travel and tourism campaigns that we do as a state to kind of just make sure that we are on the radar for people to come and visit. So as I mentioned, community development, our goal is really to support the growth of the downtown area, creating this vibrant and diverse area of where people want to spend their time. So we are split up regionally. So we are in Region 3, which is this northeastern corner, and then we have people similar to me that cover the other areas of the state as well. We are actually hiring for the Upper Peninsula, if anybody knows, has any contacts in the UP. So if somebody wants to cover the entire Upper Peninsula in my role, let me know. So this is just kind of a high-level overview of some of our tools. I will dive into some of these a little bit further throughout my presentation today. I tend to go a little bit down in the weeds and a little bit technical with some details. What I always tell people is it's not your role to know all of the details of our programs. That's really what I'm here for and to help you guys with and potential projects with. But it's helpful if you guys as community leaders and members know that there are resources that exist, and if you guys take this information home and tell 2 friends over pizza tonight, then that just helps educate everybody, which is really what we're here trying to accomplish. So we have technical assistance programs, which is going to be in the top left corner. Those are really our self-guided programs that we work with communities on. So we have staff who work specifically under our redevelopment communities program and under our Main Street program, which are basically we're coaching you and guiding your communities through those programs. And then there are some grants, funding, and monies along the way for specific needs that your community identifies for those programs. So those are community kind of led initiatives and kind of coaching and self-guided programs that we work with. And then under small business support, we work closely with our partners at the Small Business Development Center, and they provide free consulting services for small businesses. So this is a great tool for people who are looking to expand or just start up a new business. And then we also have a grant program called Match on Main that I'll talk about. And then we really get into our core development tools over here on the right-hand side. So those are really going to be focused on the real estate development projects. So when we have a building in your downtown that's maybe been vacant or blighted, these tools we can use to really activate that space. And then we do also focus on historic preservation, and so the historic identity of your communities is really what's important and sets you apart from other communities in the region. And so we do focus on historic preservation. There is a state historic preservation office, which is actually housed within us at the MEDC. And so when somebody approaches me with a historic building that maybe they want to activate or rehab, we would consult with the State Historic Preservation Office to know, like, hey, what types of materials are appropriate for this building? What size windows should they be? Maybe we don't want to paint the brick. Maybe there's better methods to help preserve this historic character of our community. And so the first program I'm going to talk about is called our Redevelopment Ready Communities Program. In the past, I know as a community, you guys expressed some interest in engaging in this program. About last year, this time, it was a requirement to access our other tools, but it's no longer necessarily a requirement to access our other grant programs, but it is just a wonderful program for communities to help get you ready for development. So this is one of our technical assistance programs, which means you guys would basically, I believe you got to the point last year maybe where you guys passed a resolution, you said you wanted to engage in it, and I think we kind of took a pause just with different changes and things happening locally. So basically, we have a team at the MEDC of people who are urban planners. So they have education and experience in community planning, and so they specifically are assigned to communities who are engaged in this program to assist you with looking at your local challenges and needs and identify a series of best practices of how to help you achieve your long-term vision and goals for your community. So the whole goal, again, of this program and really all of our tools is figuring out talent wants a place to live, place needs business, so in order to have a place for these folks to go, they need goods and services to buy locally, and then that business needs talent. So we're trying to figure out this whole model, but through the Redevelopment Ready program, we provide that technical assistance. So we help you look at your plans and policies that you have locally. So things like your zoning or your capital improvement plan. And maybe you don't have those things, and maybe you need to get those items. And so we provide guidance to you along that path. And so, here we go, I thought I had a better slide. So the whole program is organized around a series of 6 best practices. And so we have an online training series. I don't know if anybody here took that in the past or not, but we have an online training series that walks you through these 6 best practices of really how to align your community and be prepared for this development. And so basically, once you're engaged, you take the online training series, and then we do kind of like a self-test with your community to see what best practices you have in place today, what kind of gaps you're missing and what things you need to work on, how we help you get there. So sometimes it might be we help you pay for maybe NEMCOG to come in and help you write a zoning plan or a master plan. And so we identify what those gaps are that you need help with, and then can provide some funding for different consultants and organizations to come in and help you fund those activities. And so the whole goal of this program is at the end, you receive a certification. And so once you're certified, then that's a great tool and kind of like an open sign that we say to welcome developers to your community. So it can say, we have a process. We know what we want to see happen for development. We have a website that has our permit process on it and the fee schedule and very transparent process of how to do a development in our community. And so that really, in and of itself, having that certification helps sometimes attract that development to your community because people know that you've invested in that program and taken the time to be more user-friendly and to really identify what you want to see happen locally. So as a state, we are not here to tell you what you need to do locally or what you want to see happen. We are here to support what your plans and visions are. And the same thing with all of our projects that we participate in. We always look for local support financially and visionarily, if that's a word, in your local visions of what you guys want to see happen. So we're here to support the local level and to work with you guys. So there's 2 paths you can take through this program. You can be either a centralized or a certified community. It does take, I think the Township of Escoda was about 18 months to work through to get to certification, and that was very fast. So most communities, it's about a 2-year track to get to that point. Yes, Bob?
We have made some progress. We now have the required capital improvement plan.
Yes, yeah. And I know it was a little challenging here, if I remember, because you guys technically fall under the county for your zoning, where that's very unique and different than most, a little bit larger communities too. So. But yeah, happy to connect you. Pablo is our planner for the region. He is actually out on leave. He just had a little girl, but we'll be back next month. So happy to connect you guys with Pablo again. He can also come and do more of a in-depth presentation on this
Yeah,
program
I talked.
if that's of interest and if you guys have further questions about it. So this just, again, kind of talks about the value of participating in the program. So I mentioned there's the technical assistance match money for anything that you identify along the way that you need to work on. And then really at the end, once you have that certification, I talked about it's kind of the signal that your community has its ducks in a row and is open for business. And then we have another team of individuals who is called our redevelopment services team. And so they specifically only work with the certified communities, and they will help you identify your priority sites for development. So each community usually selects 3 sites that are a priority for development. They can be either locally owned sites or privately owned sites, as long as we have willing to participate individuals that want to see development happen on those sites. And then we will help you with whatever barriers those sites have for development. So maybe the barrier is it needs some environmental work done. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Maybe we can help fund that environmental work, and so that we can get an environmental report and have that ready to go to an interested buyer who wants to see a development. A lot of times we're helping put together like an architectural package of a vision of what could happen on this site. So I'm actually not very visionary of a person, interestingly enough, for this job, but sometimes we'll do a rendering, a cost estimate, some floor plans of, hey, here's a vacant site, or here's a building that needs to be demolished. Here's what it could look like someday. Maybe it could be a beautiful 2 or 3 story mixed use project. Here's kind of how you could get those plans started. And so that's a second kind of pool of money that your community would have access to once you're at that certification level. And again, that second team of individuals deployed to your community. And so this is kind of some of the things I talked about. So they'll do like design build scenarios, pre-development assistance, maybe some environmental work. Sometimes we also host in the certified communities like a showcase day. So sometimes we'll say, okay, we're going to do a showcase day maybe in Region 3 and highlight Indian River and highlight the properties that you have available for development, and bring in developers and contractors from across the state and kind of showcase those properties for you guys. Any questions so far? Yes. Yeah.
So how do we, or how does someone identify properties for development?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of communities will meet like this locally between different boards and local groups that you have, and put together just a list of sites, and then go through and do like a series of voting exercises to really determine what you guys think is a priority locally. So a lot of times people just do something as simple as putting sheets around the room and having people vote for which sites they think. It's important to remember though that we need the sites to be willing to be ready for development. So sometimes communities have a priority site, but maybe that developer is, or that property owner is like, I don't want to ever sell. I just want to hold on to this forever. And that's a thing. There are those properties in every community I cover. But so we want to make sure that these are properties that actually could be applicable to development at some point in the future. So having willing participants is really key to that. But yeah, a lot of people just do honestly like a voting exercise between their local boards and organizations.
Have you ever done an airport?
So these would be focused on projects in our traditional downtown area, because ideally we want to use the tools I'm going to talk about later to also help develop those properties.
Okay.
So we would want to focus this on everything in your like traditional downtown core.
But what is your definition of downtown?
Yeah, yep. So there is a technical definition of downtown, which is basically 20 or more parcels which are 0 lot lined and zoned for commercial and mixed use development. So I would say for this community, I would really look at anything, from the bridge here, kind of to the stoplight on the corner, by the North Star Gardens area. I don't think I would go, past the state park. I think then you're getting more to where it's like a little bit spread out. We really look for walkability, connectivity to downtown. Again, if we're going to bring folks, into this core area to live, they want to be able to walk to goods and services, to restaurants, to nightlife. So that walkability key is really important.
Now, I will tell you that north of the bridge is plenty of walkability, not very far, but there is a community on the other side of that bridge.
Going this way?
Yes.
So, but we want to focus on that
About 3 blocks.
concentrated area where
It's
there's that
very
20 parcels. So
concentrated.
you could maybe go, and some of our tools were a little bit more flexible on going a couple blocks or like within a 5-minute walk to the downtown area
Oh,
with some of
definitely
our
within
tools.
5 minutes, yeah.
But we really want to focus on this core concentrated area of development, especially where there's existing infrastructure. Some of these projects have such a gap and are financially challenged to begin with, where if you're looking at adding new infrastructure, just increases the project cost and makes it even more complex of a deal and hard to finance. So we really, I would say this core area, maybe a couple blocks away, as long as there's some connectivity to that.
What's A&E?
So that would be architectural and engineering.
Okay.
So that's one thing that we see probably most common with this program. Yeah.
At the very beginning, you mentioned that you had to be certified in order to access the money, but that's been eased.
Yes.
Can you give us, so we can continue in the process perhaps of getting certified, if that's the case, but
Yeah.
that we can actually get involved in some of these projects?
Yes,
For
some of the
funding
later tools I'll talk about. So
before
you do
that.
need to be certified to access these tools for your priority sites. But we have specific grant and loan programs that a developer can utilize already today before you're certified, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. And then, so this is just a map, and it actually might be a little bit outdated, but of our communities around the state that are engaged and certified. So in this region, the certified communities would be Rogers City, Alpena, Grayling, and Ascota. So those would be kind of your neighbors who are certified. And then like Sheboygan and a few others sprinkled throughout are engaged in the program and working on that certification. I will also tell you that we have started having a cohort of fellows available to communities to help you specifically work on this program. So we partner with CEDM, which is an organization housed out of Lansing, and we offer a 15-month fellowship where we're actually paying for somebody to be placed locally in your community, and they specifically, work on helping you achieve certification in this program. So Sheboygan had a fellow last year, and then Gaylord has a current fellow right now. So that is something to keep an eye out for. I'd have to look and see when our next application round of that would be open.
What's that cost us?
It doesn't cost you anything.
Oh my goodness,
So,
really?
Yes, so you apply to us, and we take usually anywhere from 10 to 15 communities a year, and we approve their application, and we supply the funding to CEDM to pay for the fellow to be housed in their community, to provide the extra capacity to spend the time focusing on this program and economic development locally. So it is a fantastic program. We really look for communities that have expressed an interest in moving forward with utilizing our tools and programs, and really have the need for that extra capacity.
We
So I
have
think-
$21 million worth of infrastructure projects on the line.
We'll take
Please get back to me on
Yes,
that.
yeah, so
Please.
the cohort just started a couple months ago for this group of fellows, and they're a 15-month group, so it'll probably be around this time next year when we start the application
I got
process
a lot of positive feedback
it's-
about who you placed in Sheboygan.
Absolutely something, yes, Anna was the fellow in Sheboygan.
I don't know who it was,
Yeah,
but I heard
yeah.
just great things.
So Sheboygan's had a fellow, Ascota had a fellow, and then now Gaylord has a fellow. So yes, definitely
Wow.
something to keep an eye on. And usually when that becomes available, I put it into my email group to all the communities that I send out. So definitely keep that in mind for next year.
Okay.
So the next program I'm going to talk about is, again, still a technical assistance program for communities. This is called the Michigan Main Street Program. Has anybody heard of it? Are you guys a little bit familiar at all? So our
Very big in Petoskey.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if Petoskey is actually a Main Street community with our program, but so this follows actually a national program called the National Main Street Program. So we follow the framework of a national program. Again, it is a community-driven program. In our region, this is also outdated. We have Sheboygan and Rogers City and Grayling are certified communities. Select communities is what we call it under Main Street. So how this program works is, again, you formally engage as a community. It really starts with establishing like a community kind of volunteer group. So Rogers City had Team Rogers City is what they call it. What was Sheboygan's? I can't remember what Sheboygan was. But every kind of community starts with this group, and it's usually comprised of business owners, leadership, local stakeholders, just community members. And so it's really a community action group of people who want to get together and want to see progress happen locally. And so the Main Street program follows a series of best practices, very similar to the RRC program. And then you actually apply to the MEDC. We have applications open once a year to become a select level Main Street program. And then I'll talk through what the benefits of being select are. So you start, you learn with a training series. We have some online classes that you take to learn. Then you become engaged. It really does take communities a couple years to really formalize how their group is organized, what they want to accomplish, and then you would apply to be a select level community. And then once you're a select community, after a few years, you may become a master community. So I own a business in downtown Sheboygan as well for my hobby. And so I was on our DDA board at the time, before I worked at the MEDC, at the time when our community started to become engaged in this program. And so I was on the DDA board asking the hard questions, like, why are we doing this? What is the value? What are we getting from this program, right? This program has just really uplifted our community, and I truly believe, not MEDC hat on here, I truly believe as a community member, this is what made our community so transformative and actually helped us get that momentum to get things moving and to get some development happening. So Sheboygan applied to the Main Street Select program, gosh, it's probably been 2 or 3 years now. So we went down to Lansing as a DDA board. There's a whole binder of application materials that you put together describing your community, your district, and we applied and we did a presentation, and we were chosen as one of 3 communities every year that receives that select designation. So after you receive that select designation, you really receive, again, we have a specific Main Street team at the MEDC that only works with the select communities, and they help walk you through this whole model. And so usually now your group of individuals, which is basically your DDA board and then a volunteer base, you organize into 4 different categories. So we're looking at the design of your downtown, your promotion, how you're organized, and then your economic vitality. And then we help you understand your community and what your strategy is for transformation. So sometimes we help you bring in consultants. If branding is a priority for your community, we will help fund and bring in a branding consultant to your community. That's been a really popular one that I see most often. Sometimes it's a marketing strategy. How do we identify how to position ourselves? Do we do radio? Do we do media? Do we do different publications? Maybe it's a survey. What type of businesses do we need downtown? So maybe we bring in some focus groups, and maybe we do some surveys to see what types of businesses are needed and wanted in your downtown. So again, the program looks different in every community because it's based on what you guys need and what you have gaps with and need help with. But it is a pool of funding that's available to help you with those different kind of transformation strategies and how to get there. So in Sheboygan, we had some consultants come in after we were a select level community. It was an open meeting, community members came, and the consultants really did a wonderful presentation to help us figure out who we wanted to be as Sheboygan. What did we want our identity to be? So through a series of meetings as a community, we decided we wanted to be arts and family friendly, and culture was our focus that we decided. So, okay, now we have a focus, but how are we going to get there? So maybe we start promoting more local talent and doing more music in the park and having businesses provide more music after hours. Maybe we start incorporating art visioning into our local strategy and our parks and our planning processes. And I don't know if you guys come downtown Sheboygan a lot, but it is a happening place at night. I mean, I was downtown earlier this week, and it was like Main Street was packed, and there's music playing at 3 or 4 different places. I mean, it really is an incredible thing that I wouldn't have ever believed if you would have told me it was going to be that way 10 years ago. But it is to the good work of our community that has really come together to figure out what direction we want to go in and how we get there. So really both programs, Main Street and the Redevelopment Ready Community, again, they provide a framework for you, but the work is really on you guys as a community with our guidance here to support you.
Lindsey, can I ask you?
Yeah, yep.
Do you, if you want to pursue these 2 avenues, can you do them in parallel, or does one feed into the other? How does that work?
Yeah, you can absolutely do them in parallel. So Rogers City would be a good example of that. They received their RRC certification, and then within a couple months after that, they became a Main Street level community.
So does one come before the other or not necessarily?
No, it just really depends on where you guys are at locally and how your process is working. So I would absolutely recommend you connect with Scott McLennan, who's the mayor over in Rogers City. He really was the leading force behind creating their Team Rogers City group and recognizing that they needed to do something as a local community to bring everybody together and to get on the same page and make some progress. So Boyne City is our most noteworthy Main Street community. They have been in the program for over 15 years. And so a lot of people also reach out to Boyne City and just ask like what the process has been like for them and how it's worked for them locally. And again, this follows a national framework. A lot of it does focus on historic preservation in your community as well. So I've been speaking a lot with Gaylord about this program, and Gaylord has a very unique downtown with the alpine look and feel to it. So we're trying to figure out how to keep that identity for them, but then also how to, they need to see some redevelopment and some different things happening with some of their buildings. So how do we find a balance there, right? Yeah.
I'm assuming that all these municipalities have a full-time staff. We don't.
Some of them don't, yeah. So, I mean, Rogers
doesn't?
City, yeah, Rogers City does not.
Does not.
So Rogers City actually did not even have a DDA director at the time when they became a Main Street community. And so through the Main Street program, you will have a full-time director that you will need to hire and have in your community to now be your like DDA, or we call it Main Street director. Rogers City had none of that. So they recognized that they needed somebody to take that charge and be in that position in their community, but where was the money gonna come from, right? So they ended up doing a lot of local pledges and sponsorships is how they funded their DDA director, or their Main Street director position. So they have an individual that was brought on last year, that he moved up from downstate. It's a very well-paying job, a very good salary. I thought maybe I should apply. It was a good job. So, but they were able to fundraise for that money and receive pledges from their community. That's how much that community wanted to see this program happen locally, and they realized that they needed that focus director.
And what was their source of
on the
fundraising?
downtown? They're from community members, business owners, yes, yeah.
So you need that position.
So yes, you do need a full-time director position once you're a select level community. That is part of the application you'll put together is how are we gonna recruit for a full-time position? How are we going to fund it? How is that gonna be sustained in the future? So that is part of your application.
So is it truly a full-time, 40-hour a week?
Yeah. Yes.
Or is it
Yes.
something that could be a shared resource?
Yeah, so I've had that question a lot, especially from some smaller communities, and again, I think Rogers City and Rogers City is a great example of that, where, I mean, their downtown, I feel like, is pretty similar to yours. You guys actually might have more buildings concentrated together than Rogers City, and it's a full-time job, and it can also connect you with Alex, who is their director over there, and he, I'm sure, can vouch for it's a full-time job and then some. So, I mean, they're doing things from event planning to educational resources for businesses, helping connect to the MEDC, helping people utilize our tools, putting together local projects for our tools. I mean, it's more than a 40-hour week job still, so.
Now, do they assist the community with mission statements, visions, strategic plan, or is that just totally separate?
Yeah, no, I think they
Because
absolutely.
we're heading that direction
Yes.
now that we have a CIP.
Yeah, yeah. And there are different like position descriptions and things I could share with you as well, but really the position could be however you make it and whatever you need. Our concern would be we would just want to see that position focused on this core downtown area of your community. So you will also, in your application, really describe the boundaries of what your district is. So some communities have, like Rogers City has a DDA district, but then their Main Street district is a little bit shorter than that and focuses on that core downtown area.
Lindsey, excuse me.
Yeah.
What size is Rogers City? I'm not even familiar with.
Oh gosh, I mean, they're small.
Tiny.
Yeah.
I'm familiar.
If you've never been there, you should go though. It's a beautiful community. On 23, it'd be on your way to Alpena. So you guys would just take 68 and kind of cut up a little bit. But yeah, it's small. It's a lot smaller than Sheboygan. I don't know the population.
2,900.
Okay.
2,900 people.
How many?
29.
I have
Yeah.
all the demographics.
That's how much we have in our township.
Yeah, and their city
3,000.
manager really took the charge with saying like, hey, we need to figure out a way to be involved in these programs. We have no money. How can we creatively get some money to get a director and have this effort focused on our downtown area? And so I just had my first real estate development project utilizing some of our grant programs approved downtown earlier this week. And I probably have 4 or 5 more projects in my pipeline of potential different building rehab sites downtown. So it does,
Is there any
magic
program-
happens.
Is there any program you have that could help us with gap funding for wastewater?
So those types of projects, we typically lean on our partners at the Office of Rural Development or USDA
Yeah,
for.
we're already with them.
But occasionally, and sometimes just depending on state budgets, sometimes we end up with different pools of money that we can use for infrastructure and things. At this moment in time, I don't have a good program for that. Our priorities are just a little bit different at this moment in time, but you never know. Next week I might be like, hey, we have some infrastructure funding. I think there's a lot of infrastructure money still coming from the state government and through ARPA and federal funds that we'll start to see some new programming and things happen
The
with.
reason I'm asking you that is, as you know, we have a commercial district
Yes, yeah,
system that I believe that within a year, that will be at capacity.
gotcha.
And we don't want to end up like the city of Sheboygan telling
Yeah,
a major retailer, sorry, no
Right.
infrastructure.
yes, yeah. So, yeah, there's definitely, I would keep an eye on some of the infrastructure bills that have been passed and some of the funding that might be coming, I think, in the next year, focusing on that. I think the state as a priority is really listening to rural communities and the need for infrastructure, so I can anticipate through Office of Rural Development, seeing some infrastructure funding. They just did a survey asking about this, so to me, that means they're listening and coming up with some dollars.
Because if we have pollution in this community, our tourist economy is
Right.
done.
Yes, people like to come north for the clean air, be outdoors, all the things. So I think I'm gonna skip over a couple of these here. Do you guys end at 4? Do I need to be done at 4? I can move faster if we need to be done at 4.
No, we have time.
Okay, so here's where we're gonna get into really like the core tools that we have to assist with actual development projects. So the first 2 are kind of community-driven programs, self-help guided. Here's a set of best practices of what we look at when somebody calls me and says, Lindsey, I want to buy a building downtown and it needs some love. I want to do something with it. So overall, these are our priorities that we look for when scoping out potential projects as an organization. So my first question is, where is the project located? Are we somewhat in a core downtown area? Are we maybe within a couple minutes walk to that area? Does this support the local plans? So I'm going to say, okay, well, is this in the master plan of Tuscarora Township? Do they want to see more housing? Do they want to see mixed-use development? And then community financial support. So when we're investing in a project, we want to see that this is a priority for the community also. And a way to see that happen is financial support from the community. Every community I cover is a rural community that is strapped for capacity and cash, right? Like that's the nature of the region. There's no set requirement of how much financial support from the community we look for, but we just look for you guys to have some sort of investment locally as well, so we know that you really want to see this happen. It can come in many different forms. The most common form that I see is a tax abatement. So there's different types of tax abatements that will qualify for different properties. That is the most common form that I see. And I'll explain to you later on why some of these tools are important to make these developments happen. So it can be a tax abatement, it could be maybe extending some infrastructure, maybe a sidewalk, maybe planting trees, maybe giving a parking space or giving a variance on something. So it can be kind of in an in-kind way or an actual dollar amount attributed to it. But we do need to know that somehow this is a priority to the community. We also are trying to focus as a state on emerging developers. So we really are trying to make our tools more customer friendly, really for that kind of small business owner or first time developer to really start engaging them in our processes. So again, we look for things that are creating density. So we want to build up on our existing land and where existing infrastructure exists versus building out. And then just creating that mixed kind of income and mixed use of properties. So all of our tools are meant to fill a gap that exists between a project's cost and what they're able to obtain in financing and other sources. So we are the last person into the cash flow or to the capital stack of the project. And so we are not here to replace a bank or any other sources, but a lot of times these projects have a gap and would not be possible but for additional grant or loan assistance from the MEDC. So we're going to talk about all this in some more detail, and I have some examples for you. So this is our larger program called the Community Revitalization Program. And so this program is a great tool for projects that are $500,000 or above, typically in project cost. So this tool we have used in Sheboygan on the on the Biggby Coffee Roasters building right downtown. It's just opened in the last year on the corner of Main and Division. Also the building next to Festival Square, which houses Libby's Restaurant. And then also by State Street Bridge, which is now a hair salon and some apartments. And then also the like Stormy Cromer, Lark Theater, and those properties. So I think those are my 4 projects that have been downtown. This is a site in Sault Ste. Marie. This is a historic building. It used to be office space, and they converted it into 9 market rate apartments. And so the priority for this program has typically been a mixed-use space, which has commercial component and residential, but this project ended up being entirely residential. Just because of the nature of the building, you can see like it really wouldn't be conducive for retail, and Sault Ste. Marie has demonstrated a high demand for housing right now, especially with the Sulax project. So we were able to make the case that doing all housing in this project was the highest and best use. So all of the projects I mentioned were above $500,000 in cost, so they were a good fit for this larger tool. We have other tools for smaller scale projects, but basically these activities that are eligible would be anything related to the physical building rehab. So drywall, HVAC, electrical work, architectural and engineering, anything associated to rehabbing that building to bring it back to life. It does not include acquisition, so typically somebody has a purchase agreement or they maybe work with the SBA or a lender to fund their acquisition, and then we are here to help support the rehab of that building. A building does have to qualify, so you can see that at the top there are kind of 4 different categories a building can qualify, and so I help people talk through where to get that qualification from. Locally, it's usually like an assessor or a building inspector that says this is blighted or it's obsolete and it doesn't have adequate plumbing to be apartments, and so that would make it obsolete. Or it could be historic, or it can be contaminated.
So is the eligibility determined by the community or by your program?
It's determined by the community. So functional obsolescence comes from an assessor, blighted comes from a building inspector, and then historic would actually come from the state historic office, and then a facility or contaminated would come from Eagle, from your phase 1 or phase 2 environmental work.
Okay.
So yeah, good question. So yeah, all of that's determined locally. I will say most projects just naturally qualify usually as blighted or functionally obsolete. Those are usually the easiest 2 that are a no-brainer for a lot of these buildings downtown. But yeah, so really anything related to the physical rehab of the building is eligible. Here's another project from Sault Ste. Marie. I think that's the last time I did this PowerPoint, so I used other examples. This is downtown Sault Ste. Marie, right across from the Sulax. It is a very large building, as you can see. It used to be a laundry facility many, many years ago.
Isn't that a Mexican restaurant?
This has been empty actually for quite some time. It's gonna be further on down the street and across, I think, from the Mexican restaurant. So they actually end up having to remediate some soil under the first floor. So they received some funding from Eagle to remediate the contaminated soil. And then they received a grant from the MEDC to help activate that second floor. So you can see the second floor before at the bottom was just very open, that industrial look and feel. Again, they're gonna be doing 9 apartments up on the second floor. The developer decided to fund the first floor themselves because they had a tenant who was ready to move in like right away. And so they didn't want to miss that opportunity. And so they have a commercial tenant that'll be on the first floor, and then we'll help with the apartments up above. So The total development on just the second floor of this building, believe it or not, was over $5 million, just due to the condition and the needs of the space. And so the owner put in quite a bit of equity. This negative 1.7 number mentioned there is what's called the rate of return on the cash somebody invests in a project, and this is calculated by a worksheet that we have. So this tells me, when I'm looking at this project, that it is not lucrative for this developer to put any more money into this deal. How many of you want to put money in a savings account and get a negative return back? Probably not many people, right? So if she were to put more money into the project, she would have less and less of a return. And so that speaks to us at the state to say, this is why she needs additional help, because it doesn't make sense for her to put more cash into this. At $5.7 million, this building does not appraise for that. So she has maximized all of the financing available to her, and that's why we have a gap where we need additional support. So we supported with up to a $1.5 million grant on this project. So all of the rural communities that I serve are eligible for a gap up to 50% of the project cost. So we were up to 46% of her eligible costs on this project. Other communities that are over 15,000 in population, so like Grand Rapids, Lansing, Detroit, these projects are only eligible up to 20 or 25% if they're historic. So that is a big delineation and really much needed in these rural communities.
Can you describe how the brownfield tip works?
Yes, I have some later slides on that.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked that. We will definitely go over that, but that was paired with this program. So our programs do pair well with some of our other tools and other Eagle money or MSHA state agency money, other federal money. So we are here to pair well with other state and federal programs. Here's another example. This is over in Alpena. This was actually one of my first projects in 2018. This used to be the dry dock, which is my understanding was like a very scary restaurant and bar combination. The developer came along, purchased the building, ended up putting almost $1.5 million in the building to create the new red brick tap and barrel. If you haven't ate there, I would highly recommend it. And then there's 5 beautiful market rate apartments up above that have kind of a river top deck that faces out to the Thunder Bay River there. So again, the owner invested 12% equity. The cash rate of return was 4%, so it was looking a little better, but we really look for anything under 12% is our guideline, and so we're still well under that 12%. The local community supported the project with a facade grant and then also with an NEZ tax abatement. So an NEZ tax abatement is only a tax abatement on the residential units. So the local community still received the increase in taxable value on the first floor and then kind of gave up as a compromise some of that increase in taxable value that resulted from the second floor being activated. So many of my communities also have like a tax abatement policy, and so the amount and time of your abatement may be based on your investment or how many residential units you're creating. So that's also a good kind of way to organize your local tools.
What if they're not residential? What if they're hotel rooms?
Yeah. So the NEZ abatement is specifically for residential units. If they were another type of property, you would look at like an Oprah or some of the other tax abatements. So then we filled the gap of $622,000 with a grant on this project.
Lindsey, the DDA facade grant, is that something that the DDA would have applied for and they
So
had the funds, or?
the DDA in Alpena, they have a pool of money that they've set aside to have their local facade program. And so they have a set of guidelines and criteria of how they go through and make awardees to local projects every year. And Alpena is one of my communities with more of a robust program. $20,000 is quite a bit. Sheboygan's facade program, I want to say, is like $1,000 per side of your building. So it is possible to scale that down to whatever works better for your community.
But the DDA filed for that facade grant from the state, is that correct?
So the
Or several funding
DDA
areas?
had money in a bank account
Okay.
for a facade program, and they gave that $20,000
Okay.
to this
Okay.
project.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
So
through a local
however they
application
generate the
process.
funds, okay.
Yeah. We are working on some things at a state level to help assist local facade programs, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
So this is a smaller version of the CRP program. This is going to be for projects under $500,000 in size. This is a newer tool that we really started with in the past year. We really wanted a smaller scale program geared more towards, that small business owner or emerging developer. And so the big difference here is acquisition is part of the project cost. So when we're filling out the spreadsheet of what eligible activities they have, acquisition is included in that. Again, it can go up to 50% of the project cost with a maximum grant of up to $250,000. So that would be your $500,000 project, and then a grant from us for $250,000. They do have to have limited developer experience, so we're, again, really trying to focus on that emerging developer group. And here's where we're a little bit more flexible on location. So maybe it's within, 5-minute walk or a couple blocks to the downtown area. So the building does not specifically have to qualify as with the CRP program, but it does need to activate or reactivate space. So that can be a variety of different things. This building is actually in downtown Negaunee. And as you can see, it was a pretty ugly building before. It is now a real estate office. So it created 6 jobs, and now the whole entire building is real estate offices. So again, they were able to demonstrate that they were creating jobs and that commercial was the best use for this space. And so we can be flexible with what's best for the community and the business. So questions there. So all of our tools take time, I will also say. So our process is about a 4 to 6 month process, just depending, and a lot of that's driven by the developer. So I relate this to applying for a mortgage, mainly because I used to work in the mortgage world, but we are going to send you a checklist of documents as a developer. You are going to need to fill out those documents, send them into us. We have an underwriting team. I will review them, my supervisor will review them, so that process can take some time. We will provide you feedback, and then a lot of that process is driven by how quickly you get this information back to us. This is a sample of our workbook that we fill out. It's called the Proforma, and this is how we see the financial need for a project. So this is a snapshot of the sources and uses tab. So on the left is where you would plug in your eligible project costs. So basically you would get a cost estimate from a contractor. You would go through, you would plug in all the numbers for drywall, HVAC, electrical, and you'd come up with eligible project costs. It looks like this one is $4 million up at the top. That's your hard cost. The part above it is cut off. So this was a $4 million project. They had some other architectural costs that brought it up to now we're at 5.9 is our total eligible project. And you can see the maximum they could seek from the MEDC would be 2.9 million. So then over here on the right, they plug in what the sources are. So they're going to have a loan, it looks like of 3.3 million. Looks like they also have a little bit of an equipment loan. Then they also utilized some USDA money. Looks like this might be an agriculture project, and there was some MDARD money from the state agriculture department. And then they received a nice facade grant from, this is in Hancock, it looks like. And then we can see the owner had some cash into it, and then that makes us balanced. We have enough money to fund our project with the MEDC contribution in there. So that's kind of how we look at and analyze a project, like in a rough summary. We really do more of a deep dive into this, but I don't think we need to go that far for your sake today. It's just important to know we want a project to be successful at the end of the day. So if we're going to help invest in a property, in a building, we want to make sure that the project can happen so that it's not going to be stuck 2 months in and be like, oh my gosh, we're over budget, we can't complete this, right? And that it can be successful at the end of the day, and that you can afford and pay any debt that you're taking out as part of developing this property. And so we look at things like cash flow and debt service to really analyze your project and make sure it has a need and that you can be successful at the end of the day. Okay, so this is my job. I look at these all day. Okay, so now we can talk about brownfield. So I am just going to guess that you guys probably fall under the county's brownfield redevelopment authority. So that would be like your local board at the county level of where you would have brownfield projects qualified through. Does that ring a bell? Does that sound right?
Never heard of it.
Okay, yes.
Several years ago, I was on the Sheboygan County Economic Development.
Okay.
And I was chair of the brownfield.
Oh, great.
Right.
You're an expert in the field.
Well, I mean, I'm not there anymore, but that's where the brownfield, and there were several identified sites in Tuscarora Township that were identified as brownfield.
Yes, yeah.
And there was some remediation done under that program at that time.
Yes, perfect. I'm glad you're here. And then did you have a question as well? Somebody in the back?
Good.
No? Okay. So some people get really scared when they hear of brownfield because they think it means like, oh my gosh, my property is contaminated, I have problems, it's going to cost a lot of money. That's not necessarily the case. There are many ways to qualify for brownfield. This is actually the same qualifier as our community revitalization program. So it could be contaminated, but the property could also be blighted, historic, or functionally obsolete. And we'll talk more about some examples of what that can look like. So the MEDC is involved in any non-environmental component of your project, and I'll talk about what that looks like. And then this is old. DEQ is now called EGLE, which is the state environmental agency. So they would be in charge of any environmental aspects of your project. So sometimes there are 2 state agencies involved, and then also your local brownfield redevelopment authority is really where it starts. So what does this mean? What does this all look like? So when you have a site that qualifies in any of those ways, you will work with a brownfield consultant. So there are brownfield consultants that exist in the world, and they help you put together what's called an Act 381 work plan. So that work plan is basically a document that says, okay, here's my project scope, here's my site, what activities do I have that qualify for this tool? So the eligible activities are demolition, lead and asbestos, site preparation, and infrastructure that the MEDC would approve your incentive for. And then if you have environmental cleanup, EGLE would approve your incentive for that. So what is the incentive? It's not a grant, but it's a tax reimbursement. So that's why it's called tax increment financing. So when you have a property, and let's say today your tax bill is $1,000, but then you develop it and now your tax bill is $10,000, it just went up $9,000. And I have a better slide for this. Here we go. So let's say here's your baseline, it goes up, it went up by $9,000. I'm going to use my own numbers here. So now you have $9,000 of increase that you have in your tax bill. That increase is available to you as reimbursement depending on how much you've invested in eligible activities for that site. Does that make sense? So this can be spread out over a period of 30 years is the maximum that you can go. So if my tax bill went up by $9,000, I invested $1 million in my site, I have $9,000 over 30 years available to me to reimburse me on my tax bill. These tools are hard to understand sometimes at the local level, like why are we giving up our tax increase, right? So looking back at that pro forma tool I showed you earlier, that is where we see financially why these projects need these tools to make them feasible. So when we're looking at things like cash flow, we can see that this project is not cash flow paying a $10,000 a year tax bill. So, but when we plug in that reimbursement of $9,000 a year, now the project makes sense and now it can cash flow at an appropriate level for the development to be successful.
Do you take school money away?
So it does. So there's the local capture of your local tax base, and then this is the state tax capture. So I don't think it specifically affects the school pot of funding though, and I'd have to look into that. So we have a specific staff at the MEDC that works on brownfield projects and would work with your consultant and your local brownfield authority on what all of that looks like. So, but they are a tool that can be paired with other programs. It's not direct grant funding, but it is a tax reimbursement tool on that increase in value. So the trigger here is your project has to have an increase in value in order to use this tool, okay?
So conceptually, it's a lot like, functions a lot like a land bank.
I mean,
With the tax abatements and rebates for X amount of time.
potentially, yes. A land bank is actually one way you can also qualify to use brownfield if you don't qualify in one of the other ways, interestingly enough. So really, all of our tools, this slide just shows you a breakdown of our process. All of our tools take time to work through, but during that time, a developer is also working on other things. They may be working with their lender on doing an appraisal. They may be working with their contractor, an architect on getting their plans together. So as I mentioned, our process can take anywhere from 4, 6, 8, 9 months, depending, how long it takes for somebody to get all the pieces working kind of collectively together. But during that time, we're doing many different things. So first they call me, I review their project. I like to come in person and view their project, walk through the building, walk through the scary basement, and then we talk about what sources they're using, what gap they might have with the project. And then I'll help them fill out the pro forma workbook, and then I present that to our leadership for our letter of interest, which says, hi, we like your project, we'd like to move forward with a full application, and then we move forward with a whole application, and our underwriting team will start reviewing your application package. So all of our funding is approved by what's called the Michigan Strategic Fund. So we have a board of directors. If your project is over $1 million, we go to a board meeting and we seek approval. Otherwise, it's a signature on a board memo, and then we have a grant agreement, and then you would start construction. And then we always have milestones in compliance after our project. So we do like to make sure our funding gets used appropriately and in the right ways. And so you would submit to us like your sworn statements and your invoices to then have reimbursement come back to you with our funds. And then usually for about 3 years we have compliance where we want to know, like, what are your rental rates? How did this impact your community? What are some good things that came about from this project?
So Lindsay, the amount of the valuation of the TIF,
Yeah.
is that developer generated and then validated by you, or is that something you generate based upon the developer's information?
So it's really based on what their increased taxable value is after the project's completed, which really comes from an assessor.
Okay,
So you would work with an assessor and you would show them your plans and they would say, okay, after you're done with this project, Lindsay, now your tax base is gonna be $10,000 a year. And that's where they would get that number from.
The way a particular individual's financial advisor presented it to me was like the owner or developer has to have X match. And I was for a project.
So our maximum funding is up to 50% of the project cost. So you have to have a loan and some equity for the other 50%.
So this person led me to believe, and I could have been wrong, that the only way to do it was tax incremental financing. Is that actually true? I find that hard to believe.
So I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, but when we put the project numbers together in that pro forma workbook is where we'll see if a project needs some of these tools like a tax abatement or tax increment financing to help reduce their operating expenses to make them viable and to make it cash flow. Does that help answer your question?
Well, I was just kind of led to believe that this is the only way that matching funds can be presented. I don't believe that to be true.
So we do, back to my slide in the beginning, we do look for local support in all of our projects, and it kind of talks about it again here. So we do look for local support in a warm and fuzzy way, meaning it's in your like vision, your master plan, and then also in some sort of financial way from the community.
Because you can imagine some citizens would be a little concerned about their government giving up tax revenue for a commercial business venture.
So the caveat to that is some of these projects are not financially feasible without making that happen. So those projects aren't going to come to your community, and then you're never going to have an increase. So you may be giving up an increase for 5 years or for 10 years, but further on down the road, now you have that development, which is going to be contributing back to your community.
10 years is a long time.
I was on my DDA board. I shared that with you guys originally before I was familiar with these projects and tools, and I was the board member who said, I don't want to give this project a tax abatement. Like, I don't understand it, I don't get it. And then I started looking at the financials of these projects and seeing these projects are not financially possible. I mean, these people are getting a negative 1.7 rate of return. Who's going to invest in
So
that,
are there
right?
5-year?
So you can put together a program to determine what your local like rubric looks like, and I really appreciate that method so that you're layering tax abatements. So maybe not everybody's getting a full abatement for the maximum amount of time. Maybe they're only getting an 8-year abatement instead of a 12-year abatement. Maybe they're not getting, you know, the full amount that they're eligible for. And so that way you have some things layered and structured that will come off and come onto your tax roll at different periods of time. So I
But
do
wouldn't it be
appreciate that.
incumbent upon that developer, that businessman, to show value? If you give us this abatement, this is what this community is going to get. Jobs, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think that's
Not
fair.
just
Right.
give me.
Right, yeah. I think that's fair, and especially if you guys have a local policy that
Show
says, hey,
value.
this is what we want, and show us that you're creating this, show us that you're creating these jobs, you know, show us how much you're investing into the project, and maybe part of that is tied to how much private investment they're bringing to the
The
community.
first question out of my mouth is, how many jobs?
Yeah, yep.
And what kind of jobs?
Sure, yeah, yep, I think that's fair. So, and that would really be up to you guys locally to decide how that program works and is designed. But I'm happy to share some examples from other communities of different rubrics and things they put forward to those. But yes, we do look for local support financially in some way from the community, so we know this project is a priority to you, and you also have some local skin in the game, you know, before we look to some state funding. So it can also be through a facade program. I think a facade program is harder for a lot of communities because that's like money you have to come up with today, versus the tax abatement is really money that you're not missing out on today, right? You're still getting the tax value of that property today. So you're still getting your $1,000 today, you're just foregoing that increase for a couple of years in order to make this feasible and to happen in those first few years after development where things are still financially challenged. So, I mean, some of these projects, they're gonna be under construction for a year or two, and then there's usually a lease-up period, so they're not really getting a lot of revenue necessarily in the first few years where they have other obligations and loans and things that are due. So it really does make sense. So yes, we collaborate with local units of government, other state agencies. There's one more, here's kind of some other local support. Land donation is something I'm seeing a little bit more popular. So if you have a like swatch of public land that you want to see developed, maybe you find a developer and maybe you give them a break on the price of that land. So that's another kind of in-kind way you can show that support.
How is that legal? Because our township attorney has repeatedly told us that we have to get fair market value.
Oh, interesting. I have had other communities do this. I don't know the legalities at the local level, but I have had other communities that have given land for $1.
I've seen that, but I haven't been
Yeah.
able to figure it out.
Yeah, so I'm happy to again make some recommendations there for
Okay.
you. So this program, I just want to spend a couple minutes on. I think I'm coming back in a couple weeks to talk to your recreation board about. Is that it?
Parks.
Parks, okay.
On the 30th.
Yes, yeah, so this is just a really great community tool. It's super easy, it's low-hanging fruit. If your community does nothing else in life, you should be doing this. So this is our Public Spaces Community Places program. It is for a local unit of government or a nonprofit to apply for, and we are trying to activate that public space in your community. So it is a crowdfunding campaign through a website called Patronicity, where you submit a project, you fundraise money locally, we match your money, it's very quick and easy. Some of the projects that we look for are gonna be things like pickleball. Pickleball is like the thing right now.
Oh, yeah.
I just had pickleball courts on Mackinac Island that we have an active campaign for. We've done a lot of trail projects, sculptures, art in the park, dog parks, anything that is activating that public space in your community for people to just enjoy. Benches, placemaking, you know, water fountains, bike racks, you know, all of those kind of public amenities to really establish a sense of place in your downtown where people want to spend time.
We just spent $45,000 on pickleball courts, but we have a project on the books that we haven't been able to fund that extends our non-motorized trail from the Sturgeon River to our massive park complex.
Yeah, that'd be
Would
fantastic,
this-
yes. So part of the trail that goes around the top of Burt Lake was also part of one of these campaigns as well.
okay.
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
basically, you fundraise money, your campaign's live for 30 days, you fundraise money, we match the amount that you fundraise up to $50,000. If it's universally accessible and designed, we'll actually go up to $75,000. So if you fundraise 75, we match it with 75, you just have to meet your goal.
Because
So-
our motel and restaurant property owners would grossly benefit.
Yeah, yeah.
Both summer and winter.
Yes, yep, and so this is for community members to pledge money to. They can give $10, $100, business owners, you know, anybody who really just, we want that community support for the project. And so any dollar amount anybody can give to the project helps you reach your goal. I think we talked about this last time I was here, there's a maximum of how much one entity can contribute.
Yeah, 10 grand.
Yes, yeah, but, so you can have some larger businesses, larger donors in there, but the goal is to really get that community buy-in and support for these projects. So here is our website for community development, which is the landing page for all of the tools I talked about today, some social media links, and then I also have some cards with me too, and some printouts of some of the different programs. So again, I don't expect you guys to be experts today and know all these details, but just knowing that there are programs and tools that exist is helpful, and if you take this away and tell 2 of your friends, I think that's fantastic. So you have to start somewhere, and some of these tools are just a great starting point for communities to start seeing some momentum and engagement.
I wanted to personally thank you for telling me about the Community Spaces Grant.
Yeah.
Myself and my deputy here, Ron Odenwald, and our library director
That's
have been
fantastic.
working on this frantically. We might be able to submit by tomorrow, but I was astounded that there is no match.
Yes, yeah, so that program is actually through a different state agency, but
Right.
again, happy to share information and resources, and I'm glad that worked out and you guys were able to utilize that program.
And I can't draw the distinction between a Michigan Department of Labor funding a building, but I'll take it.
Yeah, so they are kind of the state agency that all of us are really housed underneath. And so I think they received some federal ARPA funding that they were
Yes.
looking to do some programming with, and they decided to do some programs for
We
community
have a very,
facilities.
very good chance.
And so I do think as a region, we really lack sometimes in taking advantage of some of these resources, and it's hard to have the capacity and to be able to put together some of the applications, but I think that makes your application more competitive sometimes for our region. So I'm happy to hear that you were able to do that.
So my last question, and then I'll shut up.
Yeah.
Have you and Pablo ever done like a joint
All the time, yeah.
presentation where I would, as a supervisor, call in our planning commission, our DDA on a Saturday or an evening,
Yes.
and this body, and just let you two educate us all?
Yes, yeah, and then he will really go into more detail about what
So
to
you've
expect
done
during the
that
RSC
before?
process. Yes, yeah, so he'll be back mid-September.
Right.
So we could absolutely look at something later this fall for that. I also sometimes do this presentation like a lunch and learn or evening for business owners in the community to just know a lot of these tools.
Well, I'll have it
exist.
catered.
Yeah. So, and with Shiloh, we actually tried to put something together, I think it was like January, February last year, and it's a tough time of year. I think it ended up being a blizzard that day. There were some challenges, so we were thinking about doing that and then trying to work on coordinating a better time.
I'm just waiting for him to get back so I can proceed with
Yeah.
RRC.
Yes, yeah. So there's, I think, a whole variety of different tools out here. It just really depends on what's the best fit for you guys. But we are here to support you in any way, shape, or form, so.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to suggest that maybe the audience might be allowed to ask any questions.
Absolutely. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, yeah.
Don?
So, a couple things. The RRC, I know that we were working on it for a while. We were working towards essentials.
Yeah.
It kind of got shelved, but one of the things you mentioned about zoning,
Mhm.
and I had been in communication with Denise Klein
Yeah.
to work she told me that NEMCOG would actually sit down with the county to work through the zoning issues,
Yes.
that it could be done. That we didn't necessarily have to have zoning here, that we could work
You
through
could still use that. Yeah.
through the county.
Yeah, and so that is something I would definitely follow, because I know Pablo's been a part of those conversations
She
too.
had conversation with Pablo.
Yes, yeah, so when
You
he
can do
gets
it
back,
overlay anyway.
I think that would be a great to follow up on, since they've all been a part of those conversations. But we do partner with NEMCOG a lot. They are a fantastic resource for communities working on that program to provide that kind of technical assistance, and that they will help you put together some of the plans and things that you need. And we provide funding sometimes to NEMCOG to help you locally with those
Yep,
activities.
She said that.
Yes,
She did
yeah.
that.
Good.
And then you and I had talked a couple of years ago about, when you mentioned the trails,
Yeah,
about connecting the green docks, figuring out a way to connect the trails, or get trails down through to connect all the conservancy properties down Chippewa Beach, because we now have 3 of them to improve walkability, but I know it's outside the DDA,
It is.
but it sounded like this might be something that could help.
Yeah,
with
and
that.
sometimes we also see like pavilions, restrooms, different trailhead type amenities, benches, water fountains, bike racks, all of those things.
Those
to really
restrooms are a huge
help
problem for us right now.
help encourage the public to utilize those spaces, yes, yep.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? Anyone? Okay.
All right, perfect, well, thank you guys
Thank
for
you
your
so
time.
much, Lindsay.
We're only a little bit
Thank
over
you.
4 o'clock, so.
Open our eyes wide.
That was great.
The one person in Sheboygan who created so much of this was certainly, Marcella.
Yes.
Marcella and John.
Yeah.
She's a great grant writer.
Mhm.
I'm going to hire her. But one of the points we brought up the last meeting was that success begat success.
Mhm.
And when you see the redevelopment of downtown Sheboygan, you see the facades and everything begin to happen. And what happened with her operation is that she was encouraged, another person, now they have the roast across the street.
Yes, yeah, they're friends,
Right,
yes.
exactly. So, and what she did was help her develop that point with everything that you've developed here. So I think, when we share that knowledge, we can find a way to do more here in
Yeah,
our own
and
township.
honestly, a lot of times it takes a project in a community for others to see development happening, and then they want to start investing,
Right.
and that's really what I'm seeing right now in Rogers City too. We just had our first project that was approved, and I have a couple more that look like they're gonna start getting the materials ready, so it's kind of like that, hey, they're doing it, why aren't
Why
I doing
can't
it,
we?
right? And
Right.
it was relatively easy and painless, right? So maybe I should consider this. And the cool thing about Rogers City is in a difference between them and Sheboygan. Sheboygan attracted some outside development between John and Marcella. They're not native to Sheboygan. They kind of discovered it. And then they had some friends from New Hampshire that took over the coffee roasting. Rogers City has been people who live there locally that own the properties, and they want to invest locally in their own properties that they own. So just very different, tracks of development. Sometimes development happens more internally than externally. Sheboygan just happened to be a little bit more externally driven, crazy enough. But
Right.
yeah,
How
I mean,
many,
who would've told
without
me?
being specific, how many projects pending do you have here right now?
So we have funded, Rogers City is a certified community for RRC, so we have funded architectural and design work for 6 sites in Rogers City. Out of those 6 sites, I think it's realistic that I will probably see 3 of them come to fruition in the next couple of years.
How about here in Tuscarora?
Tuscarora, I think there's a good case for 2 or 3 that might be ready to move forward.
I know of the 2, you can tell me the 3 later.
Yeah. The 3 came up the other week. It was a surprise, so.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, and it definitely, I think as a region, we've really established that Region 3 is a unique kind of hidden gem as part of the state, and we're starting to attract some more attention as a region here. So I think that's also.
I think one of our largest problems is we've had all these historical sites over the years, but we've never designated them as such. And we're starting, I'm very concerned about losing character.
Yeah, and crazy
It's
enough.
already happened across the street at the train station.
Mhm.
It's not the same. They've done a good job,
Yeah,
but still.
Yeah, so crazy enough, the definition of historic is a property that's 50 years. And that doesn't seem like a lot, right? So.
There used to be 17 to 21 inns along the inland waterway.
Oh, wow,
There is 1
that's there.
left,
Yeah.
built in 1920, I believe.
Okay, yeah, and so the Sheboygan Coffee Roasters building is a good example of a project that you wouldn't think that building previously was historic, but it's over 50 years old. It used to be an old drugstore, and the brickwork was actually very instrumental to our community, and the developers wanted to paint the brick initially, and so through our process, we consulted with the state historic office to say, hey, we realize that they want to give this a more modern look and feel, but is painting the brick the right way to do that? So they end up using like a stain wash instead, which really still helps preserve that brick and keep it from crumbling. So that way we're not losing that facade crumbling off the building. And so that's an example of kind of how partnering some of those historic resources into the conversation can make sure that those buildings
So
are
is the
being
first
taken care
step
of.
designating it as historic?
There's, the only thing you would have to designate ever locally would be if you decided you wanted to have a local historic district.
Okay.
So otherwise.
Because that scares a lot of owners.
Yes, yeah, they're like, oh, I don't want to, then I have to do all this
Oh,
criteria.
it's too much money.
Yes, yeah, so We only enforce that you follow complete historic guidelines, which there is a whole like Secretary of Interior standards for rehab for historic buildings. We only enforce that if your building is qualifying for the program as historic.
Well, it's no secret that SHPO is hard to work with.
Yeah, yes. They are very like, they want the appropriate size windows, the appropriate door handles, but I don't typically see a lot of projects qualifying as historic. Usually they're qualifying as functionally obsolete or blighted. And so in that case, it's more of a recommendation of what they should be doing with the building. As in the case of the coffee roasters that qualified as functionally obsolete, they said we want to paint it. I took it to SHPO, they said, well, paint isn't good for the brick, and this is why. And then the owner said, oh gee, I never would have thought that. I don't want my facade to crumble in a couple of years. Let's do something more appropriate to the material. Let's do a stain wash instead. So that's an example of where it is technically a historic building, but we didn't have to follow full rehab guidelines because we weren't qualifying it as historic, but we still found a balance to make sure that we're preserving it in the right way.
What kicks off the certification process?
For the redevelopment ready program,
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
yeah, so it would start with, you guys had already passed that resolution and then working through the training series. And that's really what kicks off the process, is that training series and that resolution, which you guys were
So we've already kicked it off?
kind of at that point. I think we'd have to go back through, I think Pablo's last
Just to
email
let you
was
all know,
retraining.
as soon as Pablo gets back,
He's on it.
we have some updates to make. We have made some progress. Some other things, we need to turn yellow to NA, but
Yeah.
some
yeah.
other yellows to green, but we will make progress when he gets back.
Yes, yes. So for the program, we have what Bob's referencing is we have this whole kind of online platform that we use, which tracks your activities. And so things that you need to work on are yellow. Once you turn them to green, and then once all of your activities are green, then that's when you would receive your
Yeah,
certification.
just so you all know, Mike Ridley did a really good job getting that off the ground. And we would be fools not to continue on with that as soon as Pablo gets back.
Yeah, yeah. What a lot of communities find valuable is, again, that signal to developers, like, we have a process, we are ready, we know what we want to see happen, but then also identifying those priority sites and then having that additional pool of funding available to help get those sites off the ground and get some projects moving there.
But as you know, I need to caution everyone, this is resource dependent.
Yeah, yeah.
And our number one priority now is $21 million worth of infrastructure. So this is not going to be an easy task. Didn't say we're not going to do it,
It takes time.
and we can do it, but it's not going to be just snap your fingers, here it is, let's run to the races.
Yes, yep. It all takes
Not a
time.
free lunch.
You're gonna put in some work, yes.
Well, work is money.
It's all volunteers. I mean, we got people on the payroll that are making 10 cents an hour.
Yeah, and that's where I think the
$1 an
fellowship
hour.
program could be extremely helpful. So, over the next 6-9 months, you guys really take a look at it and say, yes, we really do want to be active in this program. And then, kind of showing that commitment to us and applying for that fellowship program could be big for you guys.
I think that's the key, right there, that fellowship
Yeah,
program.
yep, and honestly, as a region, Sheboygan, Escoda, and now Gaylord all received fellows, and so the pool of communities who are putting in applications is kind of getting smaller and smaller, right? So,
And I want our members here on the task force to know that these fellows are highly educated. They are trained, they are ready to go. They are just taking what they learned and getting experience doing it, but they know what they're doing. I don't think you've had a failure.
no, all of our fellows have been in the communities the whole term. Mackinac City also had a fellow, and he actually is now their economic development director. So a lot of times a community finds value in having that position, and they keep them on in other positions also.
Yeah, I would love to hire that young lady from Sheboygan.
Yes, yeah, I know. I was surprised they let her go, and didn't find her another position,
We
but
just haven't found the funding
they,
yet.
I think they will. But, yeah, it's a great program, and they're also, so they're brought on as a cohort with other fellows, and so they have that support group of meeting with other fellows, and our leadership from the MEDC also, so we're not just, throwing them into communities with no support.
And many
So
of
that's
them,
also
I believe, have bachelor's degrees and masters, or a master's degree in public administration,
Yes,
is that
yeah,
not correct?
typically they're in some sort of like a planning or
Or
public
urban
administration,
planning.
yes, type of role.
Urban regional planning?
Yes, and then this is also a great stepping stone for them in their career development as well.
You have a business card.
I do, yep, I have a whole bunch.
What name's on
And I was gonna say, and I have some for other people here too.
You can.
I don't know if I have enough for everybody maybe, but I'll hand out a few.
Oh, one
I know
last,
Bob's got my
one last
number.
question. Is there any programs you have that could help our chamber?
What are you looking to do with your chamber?
They need help.
Like just financially?
All of the above,
Yeah, so.
especially financially.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of our funding is more project-based versus operational-based. Gosh, I'd have to look to see if there's any resources I've ran across that would be more like operational funding. So usually the chamber is membership-driven, and that's where a lot of their funding comes from. Now, sometimes I have seen like the chamber role also is maybe like a DDA role or an economic development role, and so maybe that chamber director position is funded in different ways and has different roles. I've seen that in some communities that are smaller. But as far as actual like operational funding, usually that comes from their membership base and the membership fees and different like fundraising events, chamber dinners and things that they do.
Thank you very much.
Yes, yeah. Any other questions?
Anyone else?
Well, thank you guys for your time. Just
Thank you, Lindsey.
happy to
Appreciate
have
it.
any time, and I'll be back with the parks meeting in a couple weeks, next week.
Next week.
Next week, the end of the month
Thank you so
already.
much for coming.
Thank you. Thank
It
you so
is
much.
Labor Day next weekend, right? Oh, it's scary.
This coming Wednesday.
Thank you so much. Okay. Moving along, some updates from the board members. I had here just kind of a loose coalition here. John Kimball will update us more, but he did talk to the new owners of the PNC building, PNC Bank Building, Collins Associates. They have a number of other offices. They're going to finish out their build-out inside, and in 6 months, look at the outside facade. So we have a little time to work through what they're going to do and things that we've been talking about here. Robin, you had some updates too? Or you
Yeah,
want-
well, I can go after you.
Okay, sounds good. As far as Pat and Gary's, I did talk to Brian Koppel. Brian was very clear with Gary that he said, I'm building this building, so I want it to make it look nice. It can't look like a pole barn. He said it's an uphill battle with Gary, because Gary wants to be as cheap as he can on it. So we want to make sure that we have a nice facade going forward, and so Brian's going to make sure that that happens in a commitment and, a way to work it out together.
I can assure you that, just from comments I've heard recently from people in the community, DDA members and others, that if that effort pans out well,
Yeah,
there could be further development
right.
down at that township property where the fountain is.
Okay.
But
And you can see Brian's brought the forms in already to begin the
Yeah.
foundation work and whatnot, which is great. So I think, the extensive build program there, I think the facade issue, you're not talking about a ton of money to dress it up. And the issue
well,
is.
right next door where that fountain is qualifies for the community spaces
Correct.
program in and by itself.
Exactly. So I think that the goal is to encourage a business owner to update and blend in a nice looking building. I had to go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming for a wedding this past weekend. And while that's a Tony type of place to go to, it does have a commitment of development downtown. The one thing, and you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce, Patty went in to get all the maps. She's always a map individual and that sort of thing. Went into the Chamber of Commerce, and lo and behold, right there, the tourism department was with it. They could never imagine the two being separate. They look at it as a co-op program to work with each other. And it was amazing how much of an outreach the individuals there. Patty walked in, didn't know anything. She walked out with maps, where to go, how this and everything else. And that's what we've always envisioned about a chamber, but that's not part of the facade question. So, but the point is, places like Jackson Hole have done a marvelous job about having some cohesive design downtown and the walking place that it is. So we talk about our walking trails and things like that. So,
Did Brian share any rendering with you on the?
he has not shared around. He was going to be talking to Gary on it, and consistently going to do it. Gary's going to be a little bit of a pushback, he said, but he said, I'm not going to put my name on a building that I'm not proud of. So that's the first step.
Maybe we could get, maybe you could invite Gary to one of these meetings. He's a reasonable guy,
Oh, absolutely.
when you get him one-on-one.
Right. Well, I don't
always
want to
been
gang
nice.
up. I don't want to gang up on him.
He's
I don't
always
wanna-
been nice to me.
Right. And he is still a business owner, so.
Yeah.
So it works some way. The other thing, the update that I had, Sheboygan County Zone, I had another conversation with Mike this morning up there. We talked about the overlay that we want to do here. He said, Bob, that's not something that Sheboygan County zoning can do, Tuscarora Township can do it. That's how it works. He said it's something feasible without a problem. He said, I'll talk to my legal eagles today and make sure that we can do it before.
Still has to be adopted by them.
It has to be
But we
adopted,
do
but
all
we
the work.
do the initiation. And so that's something, we have to decide what kind of facades we're going to talk about, you know, and what that means.
But to be honest with you, that's all DDA Planning Commission, DDA Planning Commission,
Right,
DDA.
right.
Planning.
Well, we have.
Am I right?
Yeah, we have DDA here, so.
Am I right?
Right.
I mean, it
right.
just can't be one or the other. It's got to be both.
No, right, exactly. That's why.
Approved by the township board in finality.
Right, but that's why, you know, Diane's on the board here, so it's all works out good. I don't have to repeat myself.
You bet.
It's all good, so that's the good news there. So we're moving those forward. Robin,
Yeah, we talked last week, or last meeting, about this zoning overlay situation, how we could potentially set up some guidelines and standards for people that either build new or redevelop old. And I brought along a copy for the committee members. This is a little overwhelming, but this is a set of guidelines and standards that I developed for a 2,000-acre industrial park in central Ohio. And you'll see that these guidelines and development standards apply to large warehousing, distribution type facilities, the control points you could apply to anything. By that I mean parking, landscaping, architecture. We actually have an architectural review board, which I don't think would be a bad, if we adopt some of these types of controls. It has a whole color palette about what colors you can use on your buildings and on your facades. It's very, very extensive and very detailed, but the point of it is that people that come in, and in this particular development, you know, I would say the average building cost is $50 million and on up. People aren't going to invest that kind of money in an area where you don't have these type of controls in place. They want to know who their neighbors are, what their neighbors are going to look like, and that they're going to have a controlled investment. And this is great bedtime reading. Take a look at the level of detail that these go into, but there's nothing left to the imagination as to what people can and can't do. And it's very controlled, and we have developed 10 million square feet of buildings in this park so far. We have another 10 million square feet to go. But the companies that are in this park are FedEx, Goodyear, Cardinal Health, Macy's, DHL, and the list goes on and on. It's all
This has become a
Amazon.
major,
Pardon?
logistical hub too, right?
It is. It's one of the best, biggest
It's
logistics hubs in the
incredible.
country.
Yeah.
Because we have an airport that's associated with this. But the whole point of passing these out and having everybody look at them is, I think this is the kind of thing we need to consider in terms of an overlay district, maybe not to this level of detail, but some of the control points in these documents are things that we could use to help control what's going on.
It's more architectural control than it is zoning, correct?
It's not zoning at all.
It's
The properties are all zoned.
architectural standards, correct?
Architectural, their development standards and design guidelines. So not only the physical building, but the parking, the landscaping, the access points, all those kinds of things that I think some of which, like parking, for example, seems to be something in this community that people are struggling to find and incorporate into their developments. And you don't want it to get out of control or not be controlled in terms of if I'm just making things up, if John Smith wants to build 10 condominiums and he only has 3 parking spaces, that's an issue. So we have to figure out how that blends into what is being planned and then If they don't comply, then they can't do it, basically.
So based on your experience, don't you think that what the DDA has done in the past 2 years is a really good start?
Sure,
Because it started a character?
sure.
Like
I'm
the
not sure I
Browns-
know what the character is.
Well,
but
the brown signs, the nice lighting,
the lighting's great, the streetscape's great.
it's
I
a
wish
start.
we would have integrated some more green into the streetscape, but that's just me. But I think, yes, it is a good start.
And Women's Club is really,
Signage is also included in this, so what kind of a sign could you put on your building? You can't put lighted signs that are 20 by 20 on a building in this park. But there is a control factor of those kinds of things that really preserves the integrity of your community. And Lindsey was talking about tax abatement. And I will tell you, this development would never have existed other than we have a community reinvestment area overlay over this entire 2,000 acres that says, if you build in here, you get 15 years, 100% real estate tax abatement for a 15-year period. Now, that's not the land, that's just the abatement on the vertical. So if you build a building, your building's abated for 15 years, 100% taxes. Now, in some parts of this development, because it spans 2 counties, people have to make what they call pilot payments in lieu of taxes to the school districts to help keep them whole as you're going through the process. So there are ways to do this, but this development would never have existed having it not been for that community reinvestment area and tax abatement. It's a very common tool that's used across the United States that we could use here thoughtfully. And I think she made a good point in that arena.
if I'm not mistaken, if I heard her correctly in previous conversations I've had with her, the school is not affected. The state steps in and pays what that landowner would have paid. I could be
That's even better.
mistaken, but that's what I think.
That's even better. If
Yeah.
the landowner doesn't have to do it, that
So do a pilot.
makes the economics.
So in other words, the school loses no tax money.
Correct.
It would
Right.
just
And
be
they're
our
usually the ones that
streets,
are most
fire,
important.
police.
Are your schools. You don't want to short the schools.
Yeah.
And the tax abatement, Robin, is a perfect example of that, there's a reason then to help develop that area, and they're gonna take a chance to build it.
And it's just one tool. I'm just saying that's what we use.
Right, right.
And there are lots of tools you could use.
Okay. Okay. Monty, did you have anything to add for this moment? No? Okay, okay. And Diane, I'm not gonna put you on point, but anything you want to put in there?
No.
Okay,
Not
okay.
at this time.
All right. A lot of things to look at, and you're right, bedtime reading. But, I mean, there's a lot of issues and information in here that we can certainly pick and choose.
Yeah, that's all it is.
There's
It's
no,
just a template
there's just
to
no
pick and
reason to
choose from.
reinvent the wheel here, so
Or
we've
could,
got that.
we could pick and choose from something like
Right,
that.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you, Robin. Okay. Item number 6 was the further discussion of the bylaws and adoption of the same.
Table.
I would prefer to table this if
We don't
that's all
have
right.
enough people here.
Right, I would prefer to table until we have the full.
Take this
full
home
crew
and
back.
read it, look
Yeah.
over it.
Yeah.
It's,
Right.
I made it
Okay.
as simple as possible.
Right, right, okay.
I mean, a page and a half is pretty simple.
Um,
And I checked with township attorney.
Yeah.
This is not a requirement. We do not have to have this. We are advisory,
Only,
you are advisory only to the township board.
right, right,
So it's not a 100% requirement.
okay. We already talked about the zoning overlay and whatnot. Number 8, the update on the Chamber of Commerce. Charlotte was going to do that, and obviously, as I said earlier, she's not here. I know that they're in a state of flux. I know that they're all trying to figure out a meeting and where to do it and whatnot. I know that's all very important to the future of our downtown. Item number 9, adding a member, thank you so much for willing
You're
to
welcome.
step into this.
Yeah.
Certainly appreciate that.
It is Matt Whitener.
Matt Whitener is her backup.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Matt Whitener is her backup.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
when I can't
Perfect,
come
yeah,
in
right,
person.
exactly. So I can go down and pull beer or beer
Yeah.
too, either way. Okay, perfect, we're
Sure.
good. Okay. Item number 10, Bob, current proposals in the works. Do you have anything in there that's tied to
Yeah,
what
our
may be?
steps, if you go over here to the River Street steps on the
Yep.
property we own, it's,
All torn up right now?
what was thought to be 22,000 is gonna be closer to 80. We got to be very, very careful down there because that is a sturgeon spawning ground. We've had the old clay pipes from back in the day that some thought were non-existent or weren't working. Well, they're working, but they were, half falling apart. That added another $9,000 to $10,000 to it. But for that reason, we froze our capital expenditure program expenditures other than, I believe, Ron, the airport because of a safety issue. And until we get a better handle on our finances and see where that's going, we're just taking a short pause. As you may not know, we have advanced over $350,000 out of our general fund for engineering fees for this $14 million sewer project. And we're dangerously close to being below our required reserves. That's another reason that we're kind of hanging tight, but we'll get there. As far as the residential sewers are concerned, I had our state representative is pinging EGLE, where are our permits, because we can't go out to bid until we get our permits. Now, one thing that'll affect this group, we do have an EGLE grant for $1.84 million. The engineering is done for what's known as a surge tank. It's going to be well over 150,000 gallons. Why is that important? That's going to give us an additional 150 to 175 REUs. So before we did that, we were all very concerned about stopping development. We're going to be okay for the next 5 years if we can get through this process and get that surge tank in there. Also,
which is prior to phase 1 and 2.
Right,
Okay.
right. This is in the commercial district, but it's part of a phase 1 grant because of all the seasonality. We wrote it in such a way, Columbus Beach, all these folks back here because of seasonality. The Board of Trustees, because of its community feedback on these parking issues, directed a parking study. I believe last night or the night before, the DDA concurred with that. So that'll come up at the next board meeting to have the very folks that did the streetscape do our parking study. It's under $5,000. The VA is going to start operations on the 12th of September. I talked to the developer out there at Commerce Park, who is talking about, what is it, Ron, 60, what I call storage condos, or he calls storage condos.
60 to 80.
Okay, and there'll be two types. One is just the man cave type, where it's just, a big pole barn with a bathroom, or a pole barn kind of thing with a bathroom. But then others will be a full up residential condo. It'll just have the bigger garage door on it so they can fit all their toys in there.
With an actual residential CLO.
Okay, my question on that would be is if we're going to put residential in a commercial space?
Well, it's mixed use, it's zone mixed use.
It's zoned light industrial, so
Doesn't
you
even
are permitted.
doesn't even require ZBA approval, already approved based
Okay.
on.
But for us on the economic development, it's not just Main Street we're concerned with. How are we
Right.
going to bring in, we don't have a tremendous amount of commercial property to deal with, right? There's
This
not
is
another.
just
all
a
those-
zone light industrial.
Yep.
Oh, I got it.
And all
But if we
those
give up some of
parcels-
it to,
All those parcels in the Commerce Park could go either way. They could also handle a manufacturing business as
Right.
long as it doesn't exceed the light industrial zoning.
Okay.
And I think that is a combination of power, noise, traffic flow.
Right.
There is some formula to say
Right.
compliant
Right.
within that.
Right.
But
Right.
as far as the county zoning department, and here's my concern, and I expressed that to these developers, in that the city of Sheboygan is already doing mixed use. They have their own zoning.
Right.
The county has never done mixed use until now. This will be the first foray. So we had a very frank and open discussion about making sure that as they go through the planning process, that they are very cognizant of the requirements and the overlays of it being residential on top of mixed-use commercial, and not to get too far down the path and then have a plumbing inspector, an electrical inspector, a fire marshal go like this, you know? So I think it's all doable. There's nothing in it that scares or concerns me. I don't know how many ladies would want to live in a commerce park, to be quite frank.
No,
But,
no.
you know, for somebody who doesn't want to own waterfront property, can't afford waterfront property, wants toy storage, you know, so they're gonna have a pole barn type of setting where they can put the boat, the side-by-side, the 4x4, the sleds, the summer boat, the jet skis, not have to come up here for the weekend or a longer period, not have to get a hotel room, pay us property taxes. You know, I really don't see a downside. It may not be your or my idea of an
No,
ideal use.
No, I'm not, Ron,
But-
I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying I would be concerned, even though we are a resort town. You know, can I bring up one of my commercial divisions and find 50 people to work at it? Probably not.
Right.
I say that on all reality. I tried to do that 5 years ago in Sheboygan. There aren't enough warm bodies, and now it's worse than ever.
But if you're a plumber
But I-
or an electrician based out of
Right.
Gaylord
And
or
that's-
Presqu'île,
yeah.
and you want to
Yeah.
move into this market,
I'd love that. That'd be perfect. You know, I'd love to have room for contractors.
this guy also has experience. They have such a similar property up and running down in the
And
Grand
very
Rapids area.
successful.
Yeah, yeah.
Very, you know, no problem selling
Right,
it, no
right,
problem
right.
with the price point.
And
Price
this
point's-
individual, former NFL player, University of Michigan player, very successful real estate guy.
Right.
And he just spent 2 weeks up here on vacation at Mullet Lake. He loves this place.
Right.
That's
And-
what got him to invest.
And his price point's $250 and up per
Yeah.
unit.
And I'm all for that because it does bring people into the area, and there is a difficulty of finding, I mean, you know.
So we're looking at a $15 to $17 million project there. The other issue is, over the past week, a Marriott hotel consultant surveyed property out by Commerce Park. We're waiting to hear the results of that.
Mhm.
But I get the impression that it's doable with one of Marriott's many brands.
Boutique brand.
Probably extended
Mhm.
stay, up to 75 rooms possibly, but
Mhm.
there's a lot more work to do because,
Right.
you know, Marriott just doesn't say here, put a hotel here. And
Dawn, you had a question?
I do. So my only concern is listening about the industrial park is once we give up our industrial park
Commercial.
property, we don't have anymore. So it was one of the things that came up at the county planning and zoning meeting that I went last time, is that we need to look at our maps, our future land use maps, and look at where we need to make some changes, some zoning changes. I'm concerned about what you're talking about, only because we already have that. My neighbor 2 doors down from my pole barn is building a barnuminium, and he's got living quarters, so it has to meet the same requirements,
Right.
720 square feet, right?
Right.
So the front half is gonna be his home, and the back half is a pole building.
Mhm.
He's just about probably 75% complete.
Mhm.
So we're already doing that, and I'm in a subdivision, it's allowed.
Right.
I just don't know if it's a good idea to give up our industrial.
I guess to
properties.
Ron's point, it's a mixed use type of
It's
thing.
mixed
Yeah.
use.
And,
yeah.
and again, I don't know if I can attract a manufacturing division to come up here to do that. Now, and so if we have space though left over for welders, electricians, plumbers, you know, framers, people that we desperately need, even a locksmith for crying out loud, if we can find those basic services that we desperately need in our community to move forward, the builders are already 2.5 years behind on residential things, so
Well, to continue.
I just want to
on-
make sure there's room to do that.
Yep, well, the other thing that I think we need to take a look at is I mentioned it the last time, last mile delivery. We're at a crossroads, 75-68.
We are halfway between here and Gaylord and Mackinac City.
Yeah, we need to be looking at last mile delivery because that is a thing. It's a
Right.
big thing right now.
Right.
So to continue on with the rest of this property, you're also looking to, when interest rates finally get under control,
Maybe.
60 to 80 multifamily units, not Section 8, workforce housing, 14 to 1,500 bucks a pop.
That's right. Okay.
And the last thing, he's here.
Okay, question. Any updates on the Biggby Coffee thing coming out of the ground? Or I've had
That
several
is
questions about
on
that.
the agenda at the Planning Commission for site plan approval.
Okay, okay.
But Mr. Kinsvater, raise your hand. Mr. Kinsvater gracefully wrote an excellent grant, 100% grant for $35,000 to hire a professional company to come up with a development plan and proposal for the airport.
Sort of an assessment of the airport.
Right.
Needs, what could be done, what would be the costs, that type of stuff.
Because
We
it's-
all talk about it,
Yeah.
but every, as Bob well knows, and many of you do too, writing grants, even when I wrote the grant back in 2005 to replace part of the runway, it required a consultant. You know, all grants require, you gotta have someone with a lot of initials after their name, and otherwise they won't fund anything. And luckily, I was able to get a friend of mine in MDOT to come up here, and she had the credentials. She did it for free, and I don't think I could get Betsy to do it again, but nonetheless, we have to come up with someone that has all those initials that says this is what it's worthwhile for any enhancement.
The length of the runway is limited, as I recall, because the state of Michigan is at one end, or
No,
state land or something?
the issue has always been the approach.
Right.
If you're a general basic, general utility, excuse me, you have to have a greater approach and swath upon your approach,
Okay.
which was always a problem with trees, with the Scarab Brothers, because they didn't want any of that stuff cut down.
Okay.
Because they didn't want to look at the lights from the city, as they put it. And so the runway itself, I'm just taking a guess, and I'm not, that's why I'm a consultant. I look at it, it's probably got a 10-year life, as long as it can be crack sealed and kept up. And all of us that volunteer out there do a lot of that.
Sure.
So it's got a 10-year life, but in probably about 10 years, there's going to be a need to say, okay, we may have to pave it. Now, again, I don't have all those initials after my name, so that's why we wrote the grant, is to have someone that has the credibility in that area to say, this is what it is.
And as I've discussed, and others have discussed with the hangar owners, as this growth continues, that airport's going to be important.
Well, that was my question about extending the length of the runway, so that having light, recreational aircraft in there can. I've only taken a 310, and have you taken anything in besides
I'll
that?
take a twin, there's a few twins.
That's
Oh, yeah.
a 310's a twin. It's a light.
PGM that
Right,
comes in.
right,
I mean,
right.
you're talking turboprop, high performance aircraft,
right.
cabin class, et
Right.
cetera.
I'm just thinking if you were able to generate some larger aircraft in there, you might be able to have a fuel dump and a few things like that would attract people.
Yeah, the only thing that could do that, because we have a shortened runway, we had, as you probably know, because of the approach, our runway isn't really 3,000 feet, it's
Right,
more like
right.
2,500.
25, right.
Because
Right.
by designation, although everyone lands in the 3,000 feet, they really don't care what the setbacks are.
It's just that
by your
approach.
nights. That's just
Yeah.
FAA stuff.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's some way to, continue, the discussion about
I did
revenue
have-
neutral or generate,
I did have a suggestion, and it was talked about with some of us out there, is with your parking issue that you have here, which I hear at more board meetings becoming an issue, is why not take the recycling thing and put it next to the fire training house out at the airport? The entrance would be simple, it'd be going down that hill. All you'd have to do is put in another gate.
Gate,
to keep
straight to the-
keep people from going into the airport property.
Right.
And it'd go even close to their fire training house, and it would be in that little section there, would be for the recycling, and then you could use the recycling place for more parking.
Let me ask you, for larger planes, how long of a runway do you need?
Another 1,000 feet
Yeah,
at least.
3,500 is what we need for.
Yeah.
So we'd have to acquire,
Yeah, if someone was gonna bring in a single pilot jet, yeah, you're gonna be standing on the brakes if you don't end up down over the
So-
top.
so
soon
we
as
would
you
have to,
hit the deck, yeah.
we would have to acquire.
Yeah, and at one time, we were working with
4,000, yeah.
Norm and I were working with the Scarab Brothers.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to take the
Yeah.
hill down, which
Exactly.
was all sand.
Yeah.
Norm wanted to sell all the sand
Yeah.
to the local contractors. And then, but the Scarab Brothers, they didn't want that. It was back to, because they owned part of that hill. So it ended up being like a cliff,
Yeah,
and it would be tough to approach on 280.
so they're not willing to negotiate
Now,
the sale.
it's like Mike says, progress happens one funeral at a time.
Yeah, no, Craig Woolen's.
Terrible, but true.
Yeah, but that might be an issue in the
Well,
future.
or one barn fire at a time.
That's right.
Okay, so,
All right.
thank you.
So that's,
What about,
okay, yeah.
What about, when you mentioned moving the recycle, what about putting it over on where the old ice rink was?
Where was the old ice rink? for
That's-
that?
That's the
Oh, that's
airport
that
property
bridge.
east, then you
Part of
wouldn't
the
have to gate
airport that's on
anything.
Yeah, but that's landlocked.
West side.
That's 7 acres is landlocked.
I thought there was a drive-in, how they used to use there?
It was just a granted
That,
access.
that was pre I-75. So there wasn't this raised giant hill
I didn't think
going
so.
up there.
There's no road access to that 7 acres.
I think that's where the township just put
Made
its
an
own
ice rink, yeah.
cut in, and said, we're making this an ice skating rink, and went with it.
Yeah.
No permits, no nothing, just here it is.
You know, Don, I absolutely agree with it. If we're gonna have more parking, we have to get creative.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to get creative. We're gonna have to find
We
10
wouldn't have
spaces
to put
wherever
any
we are.
gates or any
But-
fencing or anything.
Let's see how this study comes
Yeah,
out.
yeah, but the point is, if we're gonna have a walking downtown, people have access to the walking downtown. We talked about Monty, what he wants to do with the lumber yard. Well, if we put 2 or 3 buildings there, you wanna have access to the parking in the back, be able to come forward, take the pressure off of Main Street for parking, and worrying about people parallel parking when there's, and I don't know how we do it. One of the biggest things I would like to see happen, 2 things. I wanna see Club Road speed limits reduced, and I wanna see.
Good luck with
I know
that.
that, but you know what, and I wanna see
We wanted
35,
Chippewa Beach reduced.
Yeah.
didn't we?
Yeah.
but you know what?
Yeah, we wanted that to what, 45?
Yeah.
And 35 mile an hour through Main Street is too
And
fast.
NDOT told
Yeah,
us
it
to
is.
go pound sand,
Yeah,
literally.
but even downtown, we need to have it reduced to 25 miles an hour. You know, it's 35
They
mile an hour
keep
is still
telling
too
us
fast.
pound sand.
Well,
That's a Cam Cabot thing.
well, you know what?
It is. It's
Well,
a-
I can
it's a
leverage
state-
him.
Yeah.
It's a state legislature thing because it's a state law thing. Act 300 of the traffic code
Yeah.
sets the speed limits based on, 80% of the
Yeah.
clocked speed.
Yeah.
And they're gonna have to change that statewide. for
Well,
us
I
to
just
get
know that coming south on 27, when you come over the bridge, and everybody's lined up at the, Quickie Mart, the Dairy Mart there, and they're stacked out on the edge of the bump out where
Oh,
DDA
yeah.
put the bump out. Some little kid's gonna run out there and somebody's gonna get hurt.
Yep.
And that's what it'll take, and I don't want it to go there. I'd rather
No, I'm
prevent that.
surprised it hasn't happened already.
Well, we are gonna start complying with the state standard, and we're going to be painting
The bump
those
outs.
bump outs,
The bump out curve.
caution yellow, which has been required all
Right,
along, it just
right.
got by
Right.
us.
But I think, well, Demus and Cabot both, I mean, we need to talk to both
Yeah,
of
but
those
you're
guys.
talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
a change in the law,
Yeah.
and they don't have control of the House.
Correct.
They don't have control of the,
But that could be,
Senate.
that
The
could
safety
be a-
issues cross both sides of the
That
aisle.
could be a bipartisan
Okay.
issue, and having
That's
local
what I'm saying.
control over
Right,
traffic,
right.
it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah.
But
It's a safety issue, Bob. It's got to cross both sides of the aisle.
If there
I'm
was,
sorry.
and I don't know what the rules are with the road commission, but right like at the Grouse, I've seen people at that designated crosswalk almost get hit.
Right.
Because people walking
Yep.
across, and people
Right.
don't stop. It's
No.
just like, they plow on, and I've stopped letting people by.
that's because we
People
have no
honking behind me.
flashing,
But I've seen where it must have been Sheboygan, where they have a little thing that's like right in the middle, it says legal crosswalk or something.
Or you
Yield
have
to
the
pedestrians.
flashing lights on each side,
Yield to
it says
pedestrians.
crosswalk.
Well, and the parking bump outs are meant to slow people down. The only other thing you do is put an island down the middle of it and plant the island down the middle to make it just a 2-lane through there,
For
so.
the trunks to run over.
Or, yeah, for the trucks driver. Well, but, I mean, there's certainly more to discuss here about that, so I just think, so.
Yeah, the DDA could get into that.
Yeah, well, and
It's
we'll
their-
roast
it's
Cam,
their
Cam next
streetscape.
time,
Yes.
we'll get hold of Cam. We'll get hold
So
of
I'm gonna
Cam, so.
ask a quick question. Where are we at with
Well,
quiet, yes, the quiet.
We're-
Because I'm just this close to doing this myself. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's been 2 years.
well, so there's a couple things here, and I don't want to get into too much of the detail, but the bottom line is, we had one of the only correspondences that we were copied on from the Pulte family said, paraphrasing, give them what they want, as long as it doesn't cost us any money. Let them do what they want. So we've been trying to communicate with Adam, the gentleman's name is Adam.
Or
Adam Cross.
She's gonna go knock on his door.
Adam Cross, well, good luck, because he's never there. And, you know, we have 3 emails, basically 3 weeks apart, saying, oh, we're so sorry, you're right, we'll get right back to you. And 3 weeks later, nothing happens, and I send another email, and I get another apology.
Can we just file for it?
what my opinion, or what
Absolutely
my,
not. We are not, this board, well, I won't speak for the rest of the board, but Bob Kramer says, I will not engage in eminent domain on,
Well, that's-
on an,
It's
Well,
not
that's
owned
not-
by anybody.
Well, no, it's, the issue is that MDOT will relinquish the right-of-way, but they'll only give it back to the landowner that they got it from, which is Pulte.
Okay, so the reason I'm bringing it up here is because, as you know, we took it to DDA while I was there the other night, and it affects you guys. It's our gateway.
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
a women's club that has committed to donating $20,000 for the landscape. These guys are cutting the check for the design. BLPA is gonna match.
I'm gonna donate the fountain, the dog
or
fountain, and the
10,000,
water, and the
sorry.
bottle filler.
Yeah,
Give me water
so-
down there, so,
this is
yeah.
our gateway, we just need
Right.
the well. And it's been 2 years that we've been arguing with these people or trying to get somebody to do something, and that's ridiculous.
Wouldn't Ramsby donating the
They- they-
Yeah,
Landscape's
they are.
yeah,
donating the
but,
well,
but
BLPA is-
suing the gentleman who has agreed to give us the land is not a good strategy.
There's
We're
no
not gonna
argument.
do quiet title on my watch.
He's,
Well-
my concern as well is taking a guy who certainly has more resources than we do, legally and financially, and flipping him from being cooperative to digging in his heels and going, well, if you want to be that way about it. That's my concern.
And costing thousands of
My-
dollars worth of legal fees for something we could lose, so.
my suggestion today, for what it's worth, was that, first of all, I was gonna go sit in his office and just
I'll go with you.
be a little bit of a pleasant pest, you know, not be inappropriate, but try to get some movement there. But my second suggestion is to, and I'm just throwing this out there, shooting from the hip, so I don't know what part of this doesn't make sense, but having our attorney connect with either the Pulte family or this attorney, because you get more movement attorney to
that's
attorney. I talked to my partner who's an attorney to see if he knew him, and he didn't. But getting an attorney to consult to say, hey, you must be really busy, let me help you with that.
Our attorney said earlier, just an hour ago, or 2 hours ago, that if the other Mr. Cross agrees, and he can get his hands on a legal description, he said he could do it and it would not be expensive.
So that was my suggestion. Let's try to make
And I
this
follow up
attorney
on that.
to attorney and see if we can get it done that way. Probably also making sure that's okay with the
But
Pulte
they're-
family, which they're, you know, based on the communication, it's probably going to be. But that was my next strategy, other than sitting in his office.
But there is another issue
Where's the
that's
office
gonna
guy?
have to be
Where's
addressed.
Gaylord.
No, Harbor Springs.
I was told Gaylord.
Who?
Okay.
It's in Harbor Springs.
Okay.
Adam Cross's office is on M119.
Has
Okay.
Has anybody
He
talked to Adam
practices in
person?
both.
Uh,
Adam, Matt told me
In person?
he's both
You
in
met with him?
I
Petoskey
haven't.
and Gaylord.
Who has?
The address in his letterhead's M119.
Could be.
And when I Googled him, it was Gaylord and Petoskey, and I was told that he was out of the Gaylord office, so I don't know.
Adam, we're talking about Adam
Right,
Cross.
right. I
Because there's a
will,
little confusion, because the township attorney is Matt
yeah.
Cross.
No, I looked up Adams.
But I will caution you, one time, you and I have discussed
Yeah.
about this, there is a substantial maintenance tail. We're not going to accept a bunch of donations that's going to put a huge burden on the township. So those donations need to come with a maintenance endowment, because we just can't keep adding, and then walk away and say, okay, township, it's your problem. So we already had to work out one time where now the DDA, correct me if I'm wrong, is paying, reimbursing the township for the labor costs just to water the plants because the business owners didn't
Did
keep up
not,
their end.
right, they didn't.
So we have to be very, very careful. And I did read the design proposal, and it specifically mentioned a large maintenance tail.
And I think that we definitely have to have a maintenance plan in mind. I don't know how substantial, because for me, it's all depending on what we do there, and the plan will help guide that, and then we can identify some of those maintenance issues. And there's ways to do it, ways not to do it. Lordy, I've had enough experience.
They're very, it's a good firm, so we're looking at what kind of, like images, plantings
Yeah, well, that's
and
important
things
for
like that,
sure.
so.
I'm just surprised that you're spending DDA money on property we don't have yet. So
Well, and that
I
is-
would be concerned
I-
about that expenditure.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
But that's not my business,
There's
that's
also
DDA
some trickle
business.
down here to parks, and it's kind of positive, because if you go through with the drinking fountain on a well and it's public, now we're talking, is it monthly testing or quarterly testing?
It's quarterly testing.
And that would have an impact on parks, so
You
what
gotta
parks
drive
does.
that
Right.
to
That's
Gaylord.
not part
Absolutely.
of our, that was never, the drinking fountain is not part of our plan.
Well, it'd be seasonal, we turn it off in the
Yeah.
wintertime
Yeah.
anyway.
And so it doesn't involve, and I actually checked on the cost of that, and it's about $100, and we'd have to do it twice, so.
So all
Again,
we
but a
were-
plan
And
would
all the-
identify who's gonna pay for that.
Right.
So that does have to be in place. However, I don't know how substantial,
Yeah, because
and we
that's-
need to gear it for it to look wonderful without substantial maintenance.
Right,
And there's
that's
ways
what
to
we
do
were
that.
looking
And I'll
at,
donate the
that was-
filter every year for
That
the
was
town.
part of the,
I'm not worried about
that was
that.
part of the description, was
I
that
think
it
you
was
could
gonna be
get-
low maintenance.
I'm no longer on the board of BLPA, but I'm sure, knowing the advocates like Dave Steenstra, who really wanted to see that
Yeah.
come, you could put in a request for a
Maintenance
fund.
endowment. A
And
maintenance
I'm sure
endowment.
they got the money, they talked
Right.
about.
And they've already been pretty receptive. I haven't said that directly to them, but they've made it known that they want to support this project and, tell us what you need kind of thing. So, I mean, I can't speak for them, and I certainly haven't been that specific with them, but
Well, what we don't want to do is stick DDA with the bill.
Right.
no, we don't.
No, yeah, so I
Okay.
think the only thing you guys were paying for right now is out of the grant.
And I wrote a grant, if it gets passed, I don't know that it will, but that is, the timing of this is what I am a little bit concerned about, because I won't know for another 30 days if the grant I wrote went
Tom
through.
already signed the purchase order.
Yes, I know. I wasn't there.
It's all right.
Okay, in the essence of being here till dinner, is there any other public comment? Okay, prior to asking for an adjournment, I'd like to know what date for our next meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Well, looks good at the end of September. Whenever, Monty, whenever, okay, I got two flexible, I got three, four flexible, okay. You want to shoot them for the 28th, the last Thursday of the month, the 28th of September? Does that date look all right? By then I'll
Hang
recover
on,
from our
hang on,
daughter's
I
wedding.
gotta get,
Yes, it will.
I gotta get to the site. Give me a second.
I'm sorry, yeah, 9/28,
3P again?
same bat channel, same bat station, 4 PM.
Second.
4 or 3?
3 PM, sorry.
That's okay.
Already on daylight savings time.
Nothing said,
Give me a
and I
second.
sent another follow-up here to say.
And that'll be fine for that, so, okay, great.
Hang on.
Okay,
What day?
3 PM,
I think
9/28.
worth us to have
It's clear.
Clark, I sent a letter.
Huh?
It's clear.
It's clear, it's in your cell phone, don't drop it.
We've already.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for adjournment. Second? Okay, second. Meeting adjourned, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I told her I had to